All right, South Korean and Japanese media are both saying that North Korea has fired a missile over northern Japan. The Pentagon is currently investigating. A senior U.S. official said that there had been some movement suggesting an immediate missile was being prepared, but there is not yet any confirmation about how far this missile flew. Jillian, I'm going to come to you on this. You've worked for two presidents. North Korea is not a new issue. I think we can all agree no one has effectively figured out how to handle it based off of what you've seen from your days in both White Houses, what you've observed so far for the Trump administration. What is your general sense and feeling around this possible development?
Well, if these reports are confirmed, this is a huge deal. I mean, that kind of intermediate range missile flying over Japan's airspace is, I mean, that's, I don't like to over-dramatize and you claim that that's tantamount to an act of war, but, I mean, depending on the circumstances when we get the details. But it's a big deal, no matter how you slice and dice it. Japan's a major ally to the United States, though we're not, you know, they're not wed to us through a NATO treaty, and we're not obligated to necessarily come to their defense in this instance. That's a question that will immediately be on the president's plate.
Jillian, how does this, if you're the White House, how does this change their calculus in dealing with North Korea if the reports are true?
I don't know that it will immediately change the president's calculus, but it definitely, it ups the stakes. It doesn't mean that we'd be prepared to, you know, to launch a ground war against North Korea or, you know, sort of escalate the nuclear threat or anything like that. But it's definitely something that will infuriate the president, and rightly so. And it's something that will, I think, cause the United States to really push China a lot harder than they even have been, which has sort of been to the max lately in terms of hedging against North Korea.
And a lot of people have been describing this dynamic between President Trump and really previous U.S. presidents as well and Kim Jong-un in that regime as kind of a game of chicken is something that I've heard floated. But we know this is not a game, right? We know that these are potentially millions of lives at stake, as you're saying. And if this development is even anywhere near true, those stakes just got higher today.
You're absolutely right. It's not a game. It's not a game of chicken. There are real consequences here, millions of lives when you calculate out North and South Korea, Japan, whoever else is in arm's length of the missile or a nuclear missile. But the problem here is that there's no good alternative. So people have been very quick to criticize whoever the president is on this issue. We're not doing enough. We're not being forceful enough. But there are no easy options, and there is nothing that is guaranteed to get us from 0 to 10 on this issue.
No, certainly no guarantees. With more on this very immediate development, we're going to bring in Fox's Jennifer Griffin. Jennifer, thanks, and what do you have for us?
Well, Ebony, we have seen the reports, and the Pentagon is aware of the reports from Yonhap news agency, the South Korean news agency, which first reported within the last few minutes that the North Koreans had fired a missile somewhere from a location near Pyongyang. The reports from Japan suggest that that missile overflew northern Japan. This is not the first time that the North Koreans have launched a missile with that kind of range. The first time they did so was back in the 90s when they surprised the world by firing a Taepodong missile. That was the first time that it flew over Japan. It got the attention of the world. They've only done so 3 times. What's notable about the timing of this, and I've spoken to senior U.S. officials who said that they had seen some sort of movement that suggested that the North Koreans were preparing for an intermediate range ballistic missile, but they weren't sure whether that was going to come. They were surprised that it came today. Remember, there are 10 days of military exercises taking place right now in South Korea between the U.S. military and the South Korean military. Those exercises are slated to end on Wednesday. Those exercises are annual exercises. They have angered Kim Jong-un, the leader of North Korea. And what's notable is just last week, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson had praised the North Korean leader, saying that, in fact, he had shown a great deal of restraint. But then you saw over the weekend he fired 3 missiles. 2 of them were short range. 1 of them failed of the 3. So I believe that this is time to coincide with those military exercises with South Korea. Back to you.
Jennifer, do we know how or even when we can expect to hear from the White House on this?
Well, I know that the White House has called over here to the Pentagon to get the latest intelligence on this. Right now, U.S. Pacific Command and others are trying to gather the data on this missile launch, and so they will be communicating that to the White House. The White House will want to wait, of course, until they have that information because there will be a lot of decisions based on this. But from those I'm speaking to here at the Pentagon, this missile never posed a threat to any of the continental U.S. or to Hawaii or Alaska. However, this kind of range missile could pose a threat to Guam, and it is not clear whether this is the last of the missiles being fired from Pyongyang, especially since these military exercises are ongoing.
Jennifer, for your time covering North Korea and from your perspective, are we in a different place with North Korea than we previously have been?
It certainly feels like it is that tension is ratcheting up. There's what feels like a very dangerous game of chicken, almost a dare taking place, and Kim Jong-un continues to try to show that he is still in power and in control and able to fire these missiles. But certainly the range of these missiles has gotten the attention, and the capabilities in the last 6 months of what we've seen has gotten the attention of those who watch these things here at the Pentagon and elsewhere.
Jennifer, just a quick final question. You talk about Secretary of State Tillerson and what sounds like very diplomatic tone he took last week. Can you give any anticipation about what that diplomacy will look like moving forward?
Well, I think that you're going to see a very tough line from not only the White House. Tillerson had praised those UN sanctions. The Security Council had imposed unanimously sanctions against North Korea, and that was significant. That was an achievement. But it is clear that it is not deterring Kim Jong-un, so now they're going to have to go back to the drawing board on this.
Jennifer, thank you so much.